Well, in exactly 2 weeks' time, Israel will mark the one-year anniversary of the October 7th attacks by Hamas, the largest loss of Jewish life since the Holocaust. 1,200 people killed and hundreds brought to Gaza as hostages. A handful still remain. 2 weeks' time, then, will also mark a year of profound national trauma for Palestinians. 41,000 officially killed in Gaza, but the true toll is likely far higher, with bodies trapped under the rubble. Gaza, already besieged by Israel before the war, now rendered unlivable. It is then perhaps an unusual time to host a peace conference bringing together Israelis and Palestinians to build bridges and discuss what unites them. But that is precisely what is happening this evening here in Paris at an event organised by the group Warriors for Peace. And I'm very pleased now to welcome to the programme two of its speakers, Maoz Inon, an Israeli peace activist whose parents were killed on the 7th of October last year, and Ibrahim Abu Ahmad. He is a Palestinian citizen of Israel. He's also himself a peace activist and the co-creator of the podcast Unapologetic, The Third Narrative. Welcome to you both, and thank you for talking to us today.
Thank you.
Thank you, Nadia.
Maoz, let's start with you. Look, you were working long before October 7th to build bridges with Palestinians, but after your parents were killed, you redoubled your efforts. You said that pursuing peace is part of your mother's legacy. Just tell us a bit about that.
My mom was a loving mother, very supportive for me, my 3 sisters, my young brother, and to her 11 grandchildren. And she always encouraged us to dream, and to dream big, and to fulfill, and to have the courage to chase our dreams. And she taught us that all our dreams can be fulfilled. And in the last 20 years, I've been fulfilling many dreams, including the foundation of the first guest house ever in the old city of Nazareth, the foundation of the Jesus Trail and its hiking trail in the Galilee that goes through Muslim, Christian, and Jewish communities, and being the co-founder of the Abraham Hostel and Tours, one of the leading tour group in Israel. And now I have a bigger dream. I have a much bigger dream, and this is exactly why we came to Paris, to say that peace is possible. Peace is possible. And we came here also to say that we don't need your thoughts, we don't need your prayers, we don't even want you or need you to cross our finger for us. We need you to act. We need you to act, end this war in Gaza, in Lebanon, in the West Bank, and force and support the Palestinian Israeli civil society to reach a conflict resolution and end of the war, end of the conflict that didn't started on October 7th. It started a century ago, and now it's time to end it. It's time for this war to be the last war in the region.
Such a powerful message you have there, Maoz. And if I can bring you in, Ibrahim, as I said, you're a Palestinian citizen of Israel. You were born in Nazareth. Just tell us a little of your story, how you personally came to peace activism.
The origin of me starting with peace activism starts with me as a little kid who, I think for me on a personal level, I had the privilege, I would say, I would always say that I met the people before the politics. As a young kid, I had the exposure of meeting other Jewish kids at a very young age, which the majority of us don't meet each other. We meet after 18, 19, after school, after your views of the other is already very structured and it's hard to change. But for me, I met the people first, before the politics, before I look at somebody and put him in a box. And that's how I was raised, also like you, Maoz, by my mom, who raised me to look at humanity as humanity and not to look at religion, race. And this is what I've always done in my life. And in the past 5 years, I've been speaking to smaller groups in inner circles and to talk about the Palestinian identity in Israel, being part of the Palestinian people and also being in the Israeli society. And our peculiar and special place as a community that I believe is actually has the key to solve this conflict. And after October 7th and the beginning of this horrific war, I decided, along with my co-host on the podcast, Amira Muhammad from East Jerusalem, that it's time to speak up. Everything I've been speaking in smaller circles and behind closed doors, if I don't say these things now up in the open to the world, I'm going to regret it to the rest of my life. And we took the initiative and we started talking and we started discussing complexity, the reality on the ground, and combating polarization, which actually is the most prevalent is in the West. The polarization between the two sides. It feels like the West is in a place of you need to choose the good versus the evil. It's not about the choosing of the good versus the evil. And all the argument in the West is, how can I justify that I chose to support the right side and how you chose the wrong side? And I need to fight to prove to you that I'm right and you're wrong. Rather than, let's talk about what ends this conflict? How can we bring prosperity? The people on the ground themselves, how can they have a future? The discussion, we cannot continue having discussions about the past because guess what? We disagree on the past. And even more so, sometimes we disagree on the present. We have different realities and different truths. The one thing we have to agree on is the future. Is a future where both of us and both our people can live in prosperity and peace between the river and the sea.
And really, again, that is beautifully put, Ibrahim. But I do have a question for both of you. And Maoz, I'll start with you. And forgive me, look, if this sounds blunt, but I have to ask, did the killing of your parents last year by Hamas lead you to question this peace activism of yours? Or have you always been firm that actually this was the right path?
The contrary. Their killing just make me do more because there is a huge urgency. If we won't act now, many more will die. Many more casualties. Palestinian Israelis will die in this conflict. And now is the time, as the war starts waging in Lebanon and maybe a regional war, we must act now. And I want my parents to be victims of peace. That will be the only way for me to justify their death. And now I was listening before about the rain in Gaza. It's raining in Gaza. This is the same rain that is going in the Negev. That's watering the Negev. And for 60 years, my father was sowing wheat in the Negev. For 60 years, no matter how devastating the year before was, he will always say, next year will be better, and next year I will sow wheat again. And Ibrahim and I came here today to sow hope, to sow reconciliation, to sow the future, and then we'll be able to harvest peace. It's an act we must all do, and we are calling the France, the EU, and other nations to act now to foster peace, because war is not the answer. War was never the answer, and war will never be the answer.
And I know the two of you are friends, and I want to ask about that in a moment. But Ibrahim, a similar question for you. Look, given the scale of the suffering in Gaza, indiscriminate nature often of the Israeli bombardments there, the way sometimes your fellow Israeli citizens have responded to what is happening, have you questioned your activism, or have you had to deal with Palestinian friends saying, look, why are you reaching out to Israelis right now? Look at what they're doing to us.
I've never given up hope on my vision for peace. It was actually after this horrific war started that pushed me to even be more active and to speak up. And, one thing that you mentioned at the beginning of the show on our introduction, that it's somehow peculiar that we're here doing a peace rally in the middle of the war. But for us, it's, if we're not doing it now, when are we supposed to do it? When things are good and kind and nice? I mean, every time a war ended in Gaza, the whole world forgot about Gaza, as if the situation is normal. And the activism always happened in the war and then disappeared after. What needs to happen now is that this has to be, like Maoz said, the last war. We cannot have this war. It ends. The world forgets about Gaza. And then we'll have another war. And we'll have another suffering. And our people will continue to suffer. And, to your question about criticism, definitely there's always criticism from everybody, sometimes from some Israelis, some Palestinians. The world is not black and white, and some people would question, why are we talking about complexity and only, bringing both sides? But my answer to that is, if I'm only going to talk about my side, the only ones that are going to listen to me are my side. if I don't give space for the pain of the other is not going to also recognize my pain. And when we started this podcast and we started to talk about the reality, the real reality on the ground, the complexity, the nuance, and combating the division and the hate and the radicalism, for us, this is the path forward, because that way, I actually had a lot of messages from Israelis who never had the opportunity or even willingness to listen to the stories of the Palestinian people, to hear about our peoplehood, to hear about what happened to my family in 1948 in the Nakba. People who never been exposed to these things, but when they saw that I'm recognizing their pain, they were able to recognize my pain. That's the right way forward.
That's, again...
Despite of criticism, despite of...
Go ahead.
Yes.
Well, what I wanted to ask you about...
Despite of criticism, despite of everything...
Forgive me, there's a bit of a delay on our line. What I want to ask you about is...
That's okay.
It's about your relationship with each other. I understand that the two of you are friends. Maoz, you've been on Ibrahim's podcast. So I'd love to know, look, what have you learned from each other? What parts of the story of the other has stayed with both of you?
And I never met Aziz before October 7th. We become friends just after. And what I'm saying, I said many times, I lost my parents, but I won a brother, and I won a friend. And we are sharing each other's stories. We are sharing each other humanity. We are sharing each other pain, and we recognize and acknowledge the other side pain. And then we say, okay, from this pain, from this sorrow and destruction, how can we work together to create a better future for both people living between the river to the sea? How we can channel our anger, our sorrow into creating a better future, to use it as an energizer and not as something that should divide us or polarize between us. So we are standing in the same side. We are on the same side, Palestinian Israelis, and we are modeling the future. We are leading through the model, through our friendship and our relationship. We are leading our people into this future that we are creating for us and for everyone who is willing to join us.
Same question to you then, Ibrahim. What have you learned from Maoz? What of his story particularly stays with you?
I don't know how much he knows, how much I see him as a hero and as a superhuman, actually, because I learned from him, how, we can theorize, how we can forgive, and how we can turn our pain into action and into changing the things for the better. But this guy is doing it on the ground. He's doing it in the most difficult situation. And for me, Maoz is a hero. Is a hero of this conflict, and he's a Superman. He's a superhero, a person that is able to, seriously, a person who's able to, take all this pain, and it's his personal family. Like, I can only imagine how I would feel if I lose my own family. And when I have doubts, when I have a difficult day, we're not have no feelings. We feel, we struggle, we have challenges. And I remember all the time how Maoz is always pushing harder and harder, and he's relentless. And his relentlessness inspires me. I'm inspired by you all the time, Habibi.
Thank you.
We have time for, I think, one more question for each of you. And I want to ask you about this event this evening. I mean, I did describe it as unusual in the context of this war. We are approaching the anniversary of October 7th and 1 year of war in Gaza. For both of you, I mean, how are you feeling about holding a peace conference right now? And what are you hopeful for the year ahead?
So first, there are many of these events all over the world now. All over. We have done a huge one, Ibrahim and I, in Tel Aviv, the biggest peace rally ever in the last 2 decades, that was held in Israel. Palestinian and Israelis joined together to call for peace. So this was happening in Tel Aviv. And yesterday there was a parade in Jerusalem, Palestinian Israelis. And tomorrow, many of our friends here, our partners to the peace movement, are going to Amsterdam, and then Berlin, and then the UK, and then to the US. So all over the world, we are building a global movement of peacemakers in order to say that peace is possible, to dream together about peace, and to amplify the voices for peace, and to build a global coalition, Palestinian Israelis, with international support that will change the discourse and will change the policy that the world is now investing in war. But we are calling to send us tools of construction and not tools of destruction. So we need to change the entire discourse and the entire world policy for peace and not for war. So this is exactly what our aim for tonight is.
And we need to do it now. You know, if not now, when? Are we going to wait for the war to continue on and on and on and on and just sit on the sideline and wait for it to end and then to speak up? That's not good enough. Our people deserve better than this. And that's why we decided that, yeah, it's difficult. You know, we're not oblivious to the challenges, but if we're not going to act now, when are we supposed to act? If we're not going to call the West to push once and for all for a real resolution in the middle of the war, to end the war, to end not just this war, but the whole conflict altogether once and for all, to bring people to their homes, Gazans, Israelis, Palestinians, Israelis, Arabs and Jews, all of us deserve better than this. And if we don't act now in order to change our reality, no one will do that for us. And if we're going to keep passing the torch to somebody else and somebody else, who's supposed to take it? So we decided, and we're not alone, we have so many friends, so many colleagues, so many partners for peace, and we all decided that the time to act is now, and we can't do what the mistakes of the past. We had a conflict for 80 years. Earlier generations of peace activities didn't work. It's time for it to work, and it's time for us to be as brave as possible, and this is the time. The time is now.
Well, look, I found both of your stories extremely moving. I really want to thank you very much for talking to us today. Ibrahim Abu Ahmad and Maoz Inon, thank you both very much indeed for talking to us today at the Warriors for Peace conference, which is being held this evening in Paris. Thank you both.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And I hope, well, some of that interview stays with you. That is it for this news programme. Do stay with us, though. More world news coming up after this short break. Bye from me.